Okay, here we are. We're ready to start the finishing portion of the quilt and putting all of our blocks together for the top. The first thing I need to let you know is that I did post alternative cutting instructions for the flying geese. You will have 80, so the no waste method kind of makes it easier. I don't know how much it speeds up the process, but it does make it a little bit easier and make sure flying geese come out more square. The second thing is that there is an error in the pattern. I believe it's on page 29, and that's step 3. Basically, the colors are just flipped around. Not a big deal. I took this straight from Yoder's website. I found the error when I initially completed the whole quilt, but then I believe she posted it on her website also. So, all of this information I have posted on Facebook and in the email, quilt finishing notes. And it's basically taking the pattern and putting it in a condensed version so that you can print it out if it makes it easier. So the first thing you'll do is measure all of your blocks, all 12 blocks. They're supposed to be 18.5 inches. Anytime I do a sampler quilt, they do not all come out the same. No worries. Measure each one, mark the measurement on each one with a post-it note, then go back and find the smallest one. And that is how that is the size that you will square all of your quilts blocks to. Keeping that in mind, that will also adjust what your sashing pieces will also be, which we'll get to that at that point. So after you have measured all blocks and you've squared them, write the squared size that you're using somewhere in your book, in your notes, whatever, so you can refer back to it and remember what size. If your block is only off maybe 1/8 of an inch, I wouldn't worry about it. If you're off 1/4 of an inch, by all means, you need to adjust your sizing. But if it's 1/8 of an inch or a slight hair, don't worry about it. Leave it as it is, because as you handle your blocks, as you're piecing, the stretching that occurs will make up for that difference. So let's get started on piecing the rest of the blocks, and we'll start putting the rows together. So first thing is you will create your scarlet corners. Let me adjust this so you can see better. Okay. You will create your scarlet corners, which is fabric B and H. And you will have 4 of them. These become the corners of each. This becomes each corner of your whole quilt. And before, when we did the blocks, the red portion or scarlet portion pointed out. In this case, it's going to be on the inside of each corner. So you'll have 4 of those. And then you will create 80 flying geese using fabrics D and G. Let me move these down a little bit so you can see them better. Okay. Then you'll take the 2 by 3.5 rectangular fabric labeled C. This is step 3. And attach it to your flying geese. You'll have 14 total units then of that. And then your remainder of flying geese go elsewhere. So you'll have those next. I'm sorry, I think I said 14. It's 18 of these. The next step is creating 14 border block rectangles. And that is taking fabrics A and H, do this stitch and flip. Looks like a larger scarlet corner, sort of, but these are your border blocks. Now this block you may want to adjust. This one and the sashing blocks may be adjusted to the size of your squares. So if your square is 18¼ inches, you'll want to adjust the size of the white fabric or letter A to 18¼ Okay, but in this case, in general, it equals 18½ inches. And you'll have 14 of these blocks. Then you're going to create 31 sashing blocks. And this consists of fabrics E, F, and E. This portion only is 15½ inches. But this is the portion you would also adjust according to the size of your block. So if your block is 18¼ you're going to take 1/4 off of this, not your overall piece. You're going to take it off of this end, this center piece. Then once you've created this portion, you will add a flying geese to each end. You will then have 31 of these pieces. Okay. So at this point, once you've created all of these pieces, you're ready to start assembling your rows. So that being said, I'm going to back up, zoom out, zoom in, zoom out, move around a little bit so you can better see my design wall. Okay, so the first thing you will do, this is row 1, the very top border row. You're going to take your scarlet corner, and at this point I would lay everything out on the floor first. Then you're going to take your flying geese rectangular block, put it next. Then you'll take another border block, lay it out. Another flying geese rectangular piece. Border block, flying geese rectangular piece. Border block, another flying geese rectangular piece. And another scarlet corner. So this will be your first border at the very top. You'll create 2 of these because this also becomes your second border. Now, if you see here, we're starting to create a star, which is, I'm going to move this quickly so you can see, the cornerstones in the finished quilt. So you're seeing it starting to come together. Okay, so that's row 1. Row 2, you're taking your flying geese rectangular unit, you're turning it sideways, like so. Then you're going to have your 3½ inch squares, fabrics B goes next, and I'm putting pins in these because I'm not so sure it's going to stay in place. Okay. Letter B. And then you're going to start with your sashing pieces. Laying these in place. And continue on in that same manner with your letter B fabric, which are these 3.5-inch squares, and your sashings. And continue all the way through. You're going to have 3 of these sashings connected by your 3-inch square blocks. And final piece is your sideways flying geese with a rectangle. So this becomes row 1, this becomes row 2. So now at this point, this is where we start assembling the blocks with the sashing. And also, you decide where you want your blocks positioned. Initially, I tried to do it according to the pattern layout, and I decided there were a couple things I didn't like, so I moved them around a little. So now we're starting the block rows. And each row after this will be the same, almost, except this will be in between. So once you finish one row of this, you should actually have 5 total. So you'll make 5 of these rows. Now we get to the block rows. So the first thing is the border block, which goes here. And then you're going to have your sashing block. Your border block, your sashing block. Then your actual quilt block goes next. Another sashing block. Another finished quilt block. Another sashing block. A third quilt block. Another sashing block. And a border block. So this is your third row. You will actually have 4 of these, and you'll continue in that pattern, doing your sashing row under this, another row of quilt blocks, another row of sashing blocks, and so forth to finish it. It sounds complicated. It does take some time, but as you can tell, if you can see it, you can see where your stars or cornerstone stars are starting to come together. So, sounds complicated. It is some work, but it comes out awesome when you're finished. And don't worry if your points aren't perfect or this block's a little different than the other one. It works itself out when you're finished. And as you can tell, this is the finished product. I don't know how well you can see from here. Turns out beautiful. And then when you're ready to quilt it or have it quilted, an option is to use, and I may have said this before, this is not Minky, it is called Fireside, which isn't quite as heavy as Minky, but it's a pretty, I did use batting. Some people don't use batting, but I have a thin batting in it, and it just happens to be the way I like it. It's wintertime in Ohio. We all know it gets pretty cold. This will probably go on my bed. And there it is, ladies. This is the final portion of this year's Yoder's Block of the Month, a very Coriander Christmas. Thank you so much for bearing with me going through this whole process of videoing. Not as much fun to me as it is doing in person. I like that interaction with people. So hopefully the next block of the month, we are planning in store. So hopefully I will be able to see you there and we'll be able to work again on another block of the month. Thanks again and hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.